Hi, this is FUAD ABASOV, a broker with Right at Home Realty, and this is your monthly real estate statistics.
Welcome back to another market update. Today, we're going to break down where the Toronto real estate market stood in January 2025, what happened, what changed, and where things might be heading. If you were buying, selling, investing, or just keeping an eye on the market, January was an interesting month. We had major shifts in interest rates, government policies, and buyer demand. So, let's dive right in. We'll start with the biggest factor that shaped the market in January: interest rates. So for the past 2 years, we saw aggressive rate hikes by the Bank of Canada to fight inflation. By mid-2024, the prime rate had peaked at 5%, which made borrowing very expensive. However, in early 2025, things changed. The Bank of Canada announced a 0.25 rate cut, bringing the overnight rate down to 4.75%. This small cut had a huge psychological effect on the market. Buyers who had been waiting on the sidelines gained confidence that borrowing costs would improve and rates will continue to drop, and started to re-enter the market. Sellers, on the other hand, who were previously hesitant, saw increased activity, started adjusting their expectations, and became more motivated to list their homes. At the same time, the luxury market, which had slowed significantly in 2024, started seeing more interest. But here's the thing, one rate cut doesn't fix everything overnight. We were still seeing some hesitation in January as buyers and investors waited to see if more rate cuts were coming. Now, the big question is, how did home prices perform in January 2025? Well, while certain market segments struggled, detached homes, especially in suburban areas, were seeing a slow but steady increase in demand. Unlike condos, which faced oversupply issues, detached homes remained a desirable option for buyers looking for more space and long-term stability. The average detached home in Toronto was selling for around $1.4 million, which was in line with late 2024 prices. Despite interest rate cuts, buyers remained cautious and bidding wars were far less common than in the peak years of 21-22. Many home buyers were looking outside of Toronto's core, focusing on areas like Vaughan, Markham, Oakville, and Durham region, where they could get larger properties at better value, of course. While condo investors were struggling, those investing in single-family rental properties were seeing stronger rental demand. With rental prices remaining high, detached homes with basement apartments or duplex potential became a more attractive option for real estate investors. Overall, while detached homes didn't experience a price surge in January 2025, stability in this segment was a positive sign, showing that buyers were still willing to enter the market when the right opportunity came along. Townhouses and semi-detached homes remained in high demand throughout January 2025, particularly among first-time homebuyers and small families who are looking for affordable housing options in the face of rising prices. As prices for detached homes continue to stay high, these types of properties were seen as the next best option for those seeking more space than a condo, but without the premium price tag of a detached house. Prices have remained stable, although certain areas saw slight increases. Demand for these properties is expected to increase, in my opinion, in the coming months. The condo market was still struggling due to oversupply, with nearly 40,000 newly completed pre-construction units available across the GTA, putting pressure on resale condo prices. Downtown condos were sitting on the market longer, with only minor price movements. Several factors contributed to this trend. With the record number of condo completions in recent years, buyers and renters had more choices than ever. Many investors who purchased pre-construction units found themselves competing with each other to either sell or lease their properties, while being priced out of positive cash flow. High borrowing costs and new rent control measures made it difficult to turn a profit. This led to more assignment sales and resale listings, further adding to the oversupply. Many buyers who previously considered condos started shifting toward townhomes or detached houses in more affordable areas of the GTA, where they could get more space for their money. Because of these factors, condo prices in downtown Toronto were either stagnant or declining, and sellers had to be more competitive with their pricing to attract interest. If you're a buyer looking for a good deal, this is an opportunity. Let's talk about high-end real estate segment. In January 2025, the luxury real estate market in Toronto has experienced less activity overall compared to other market segments. However, properties located in prime locations such as prestigious neighborhoods and highly sought-after addresses have still managed to sell at strong prices. The luxury market may be a little quieter than it has been in previous years, but prime real estate remains resilient. As we move further into 2025, high-end buyers will continue to drive demand for properties that offer prestige, location, and long-term value. And the segment is likely to stabilize as buyers adjust to the new market conditions. Statistically, wealthy buyers are less affected by interest rates, but tend to be more selective, and with economic uncertainty still lingering, many were hesitant to make large purchases. Investment properties, particularly those intended for short-term rentals, face significant challenges. Stricter Airbnb regulations and enhanced municipal enforcement made it harder for investors to operate profitably, leading many to either convert units into long-term rentals or struggle to sell. With limited buyer interest in properties designed specifically for short-term stays, the market for these investments remained weak, forcing some owners to lower prices or reconsider their strategies. Now, top-performing areas in January of 2025 were Scarborough and Pickering, as more buyers moved east for affordability and larger homes. Then we have Durham region, which includes Oshawa, Ajax, and Whitby, where townhouses and detached homes were selling faster than in late of 2024. And of course, Mississauga and Brampton are still having strong markets, especially for family homes under $1.2 million. Now, let's talk about the rental market, because not everyone is buying, and in January of 2025, it's been an interesting time for both tenants and landlords. The average one-bedroom condo rent was still hovering around $2,600 a month in downtown Toronto. Two-bedroom units were leasing for around $3,400 a month, with slight increases in Mississauga and Vaughan. Detached home rentals in the GTA were seeing strong demand, particularly in suburban areas. Detached homes are becoming a popular option for families who may not be ready to purchase just yet, but are looking for extra space, privacy, and proximity to good schools.
And now, let's take a closer look at detached home sales in Toronto and surrounding areas.
An average selling price of detached home in Toronto remained the same as it was in December at $1.57 million. Average selling price is higher than January of last year and was up by 1.47%. The amount of sold properties went up by 1%. The amount of new listings increased by 49%. On average, it takes almost 30 days for a detached home to be sold in Toronto. In Vaughan, average selling price of a detached home in January was $1.62 million, 11% decline compared to January of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 43%. The amount of new listings has increased by 50%. On average, it takes 28 days for a detached home to be sold in Vaughan. Richmond Hill, average selling price of a detached home in January was $1.86 million, 3% decline compared to January of last year. The amount of sold properties was up by 4%. The amount of new listings increased by almost 90%. On average, it takes 40 days for a detached home to be sold in Richmond Hill today. In Mississauga, average selling price went up compared to December and was sitting at $1.55 million, 1% increase compared to January of last year. The amount of sold properties was down by 14.9%. The amount of new listings was up by 43%. On average, it takes 39 days for a detached home to be sold in Mississauga today. Average selling price of a detached home in Markham in January was $1.67 million, 5.5% decrease compared to January of last year in price. The sales went down by 20%. The amount of new listings has increased by 48%. On average, it takes 32 days for a detached home to be sold in Markham today. In Newmarket, average selling price of detached home in January was $1.27 million, 2.7% decrease in price compared to January of last year. The amount of sales went down by 41%. The amount of new listings was up by 27%. On average, it takes 3 weeks for a detached home to be sold in Newmarket today. In Aurora, an average selling price of a detached home in January went up compared to December and was sitting at $1.98 million, 21% increase compared to January of last year. Amount of sales was down by 35%. However, new listings went up by 34%. On average, it takes 33 days for a detached home to be sold in Aurora today. In Innisfil, average price of detached home in January was $959,000, almost 2% increase in price compared to last January. Sales went up by 30%. However, amount of new listings was also up by 35%. On average, it takes 51 days for a detached home to be sold in Innisfil today. Statistics of King City in January might not be complete because of only one property sold at $2.6 million, which is an increase of 14% compared to January of last year. Amount of sales was down by 66%, amount of new listings went up by 16%. On average, it takes 46 days for the property to be sold in King City today. In Bradford, average selling price of detached home in January was $1.14 million, 6.6% increase in price compared to January of last year. Sales went down by 44%. New listings went up by 42%. On average, it takes 19 days for a detached home to be sold in Bradford today. Average selling price of detached home in Milton in January was $1.27 million, 1% decrease in sale price compared to January of last year. Sales were down by almost 27%. New listings were up by almost 48%. On average, it takes 36 days for a detached home to be sold in Milton today. In Stoufville, average selling price of a detached home in January was $1.61 million, 16% increase in sale price compared to January of last year. Sales were down by 19%. The amount of new listings were up by 16%. On average, it takes 47 days for a detached home to be sold in Stoufville today. Barrie, in average selling price of a detached home was $859,000 in January, 6.5% increase in sale price compared to January of last year. Sales were up by 12%. New listings also were up by 28%. On average, it takes 42 days for a detached home to be sold in Barrie today. Oakville, average selling price of a detached home in January was $1.92 million, 8.3% decrease in sales price compared to January of last year. Sales were down by 34.5%. The amount of new listings was up by almost 70%. On average, it takes 37 days for a detached home to be sold in Oakville today. And here's my final thought. If you're a buyer, this is a great time to start looking, especially before the next round of interest rate cuts pushes more competition into the market. If you're a seller, having a realistic pricing strategy is a key. The market is shifting, but buyers are still cautious. And if you're an investor, focus on long-term stability rather than short-term speculation. Need advice? Reach out to me anytime. I'm always here to help you navigate the Toronto real estate market.
If you'd like to receive your own personalized sales report about home sales in your neighborhood, please call me at 647-801-3401 or email me at sold@fuadhomes.com. Thanks for watching and see you next month.